Chairman Barnes.
Yes, there he is. Great.
Hey, how are you, sir? I'm just going to give it just another minute, if you don't mind, just to allow some of the other committee members to jump on. As you know, we just got off the Senate floor, so maybe another minute or so, and then we can, I guess I'll kick it off, and then we can, and then you'll close it out. I've got that appointment at 2:15. So Senator King.
Yeah, why don't you get us rolling whenever your senators are here and you're comfortable, and then I'll take over whenever your appointment, you have to leave for your appointment.
Sounds great.
And we'll all stand by. We are already live, just heads up, Mr. Chairman.
Sounds great. No, thank you. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I think we could get started. I know that members will be cycling in. Good afternoon, everybody. Would like to welcome you to the joint budget hearing with the Subcommittee on Education and Business Administration in the Senate, and really proud to be joined by Chairman Barnes and Vice Chair Solomon with the Education and Economic Development Subcommittee of Appropriations. We're meeting today for the purpose of budget briefings. We're going to start with the Maryland State Department of Education, Maryland Center for School Safety. We'll start with the analyst first, Mr. Konzelman. But before that, Chairman Barnes, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll start with the analyst, Mr. Konzelman.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think I need to have screen sharing ability.
I believe I already gave that to you.
No, it says my participant screen sharing ability is disabled.
Give it a try now.
Yep, there it is. Okay, so we'll jump right into the Maryland Center for School Safety. We'll begin with the budget summary. As we can see, the budget for the Center for School Safety has remained pretty much level over the past 2 fiscal years, as well as the split between general and special funds too has also remained pretty stable. You will notice that in fiscal 2020, there is a higher than normal level of general fund expenditures, which when we jump to the Exhibit 1 on the 2020 closeout, we can see where this general fund growth came from. If we start with the left-hand side of this exhibit, we have the governor's allowance. This is $10.6 million and includes the SRO coverage grant as well as the Safe Schools Fund. This yellow bar here is the Early Childhood School Safety Grant. This was transferred over via budget amendment in accordance with the General Assembly's legislative intent. The next 2 bars were additional funding. This green bar was provided by the 2020 supplemental budget. So $6 million that was needed to fulfill additional grant obligations that the center had during the 2020 grant funding cycle. And then this final bar here in blue was an additional $2.4 million that came over from the Interagency Commission on School Construction. Again, this was an additional pot of money that was needed to fulfill grant obligations during the 2020 grant funding cycle. So in total, the Center for School Safety needed about $8.4 million above what was budgeted by the General Assembly. And so we do have bold language on the bottom of page 2 that asks them to explain why this funding was necessary and steps that it can take to ensure that it remains more closely aligned with its legislative appropriation. We continue now to the overview on agency spending. The programmatic breakdown of this agency, again, has remained pretty steady over the past several years. Most of the funding here is going toward this programmatic effort. So the school safety tip line, which is run by MEMA, This is a reimbursable fund transfer to pay for the operations of this service. There's the school safety, Safe Schools Fund, $600,000. And of course, the biggest chunk here is the School Resource Officer Coverage Grant, which is $20 million or 80% of the budget. This is a $10 million special fund grant that is financed by $10 million of general funds. So in practice, it's only a $10 million grant, but in terms of the budgeting and accounting of it, it has to appear in the budget twice. And so it appears as $20 million in the budget. I should point out too that there is a key observation regarding the School Resource Officer Grant on page 7. And basically what we're saying here is that there is $10 million for the School Resource Officer Grant. However, SROs are currently used in only 23% of schools. And so in addition to Montgomery County, Howard County school systems beginning to reconsider whether or not they want SROs to be employed in their schools. And so the General Assembly may wish to consider modifying the Safe to Learn Act to allow this $10 million pot of money to be used more broadly for school safety activities rather than solely just for SRO coverage. Just jumping to the proposed budget change, as I mentioned at the beginning of the hearing, the budget has remained pretty steady. It grows by less than 1% in 2022. The main drivers of budget growth here are the maintenance costs associated with some computer software and computer software systems, as well as the inclusion of funding for training and seminars, which are anticipated to resume once the pandemic hopefully passes. And finally, we have the recommended budget actions. We're recommending concurring with the governor's allowance, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much for that thoughtful analysis. If any members have questions, please use the raise hand feature under the reactions tab. Are there any questions? I'm not seeing anyone. Chairman Barnes, do you see anyone on your end?
I do not. Nope.
Okay. So we'll now turn it over to the administration. We've got Dr. Karen Salmon, State Superintendent, and we also have Miss Kate Hessian with Maryland Center for School Safety. We'll start with you, Madam Superintendent. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Zucker and Chair Barnes and members of the House Education and Economic Development Subcommittee and the Senate Education, Business and Administration Subcommittee. It's great to be with you again to provide an update on our school safety program. As you know, I'm Karen Salmon, the State Superintendent, and I also chair the School Safety Subcabinet. With me today, as you mentioned, is Kate Hessian, who is our Executive Director of the Center for School Safety. I'd also like to thank Nicholas for completing a very thorough and effective review of the budget. We're extremely proud of the impressive work that Director Hessian and her team have completed since last year. For the Maryland Center of School Safety, 2020 was characterized by a refinement of processes and the strengthening of support systems for school safety partners across Maryland. As I reflect on the accomplishments of the Maryland School Center for School, as the Maryland Center for School Safety over the last year, I am struck by how much of it was the product of harnessing the challenges presented by the pandemic as a means to drive further growth and innovation. So in addition to launching a new and improved website last year, the center devised new and innovative ways to advance and promote school safety throughout Maryland, most notably by embracing the virtual delivery system as its signature programming. For example, last summer's Maryland Center for School Safety conference was not canceled. It was re-imaged as a 4-week fully virtual school safety seminar. Furthermore, the center has successfully moved on to a virtual footing for all of its professional development programming. In a similar fashion, mandated school resource officer training was efficiently and most importantly moved online, as evidenced by the online training's quick approval of the Police Training Commission. This past summer, local school systems updated each school emergency plan in order to conform to the updated 2020 Maryland Center for School Safety Emergency Planning Guidelines. A total of 1,460 school emergency plans were submitted and were reviewed to ensure that they conform to the guidelines, where they were updated based on the reviews of emergencies and drills, addressed emergency events and behavioral threats, and they provided for accommodations for students with disabilities during emergency evacuations. Finally, the Safe School Maryland Anonymous Reporting System, accessible by phone, app, or the Maryland Center for School Safety's website, remains available 24/7 for students, parents, and community members to easily and anonymously report school or student safety concerns anywhere in Maryland. Though the system has only been in existence for only 2 years, already nearly 1,000 anonymous tips have been received. That covers just a few areas where Maryland Center for School Safety has grown in the last year. We continue to take school safely very seriously, regardless of whether students are learning virtually or once again in school buildings. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Director Hession to provide more details. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Salmon. Good afternoon, Chair Zucker, Chair Barnes, and members of the House and Senate subcommittees. I want to thank Mr. Konzelman for his analysis, and I really want to thank you all for having us here today. For the record, I am Kate Hession. I'm the Executive Director for the Maryland Center for School Safety. And I just want to touch on and expand on a few things that Dr. Salmon has already mentioned. So just very quickly, as a way of a bit of background, the Safe to Learn Act of 2018 set a really aggressive statewide standards for school safety. The Safe to Learn Act set requirements for data collection, standardized guidance and training, and most importantly, it built in local flexibility on school safety and security priorities. The Safe to Learn Act is still in its infancy, and due to the pandemic, we really haven't had an opportunity to even have one full year of in-person school since all of our programs and initiatives have been implemented. It's going to take some time for us to evaluate and assess the effectiveness of all of our programs, but it is definitely something that's on our agenda. The Safe to Learn Act reimagined the MCSS and our responsibilities of our agency. Most of those changes didn't fully evolve until the end of calendar year 2019. So the first year of the legislation, MCSS and the subcabinet developed several policy documents and guidelines. The center was hiring staff, setting up offices. We also partnered with a group of statewide subject matter experts on the development of the SRO training curriculum. Beginning in the summer of 2019, we delivered SRO training to almost 1,000 SROs and school security employees in the state. It's important, I really want to emphasize here, our intention with this training is this was never a one and done approach to training. So our plan all along has been to continue to develop that training, develop additional annual training to really reinforce key skills. So our hope at the beginning of 2020 last year was that we would have some of this training already developed and executed. But of course, we were unfortunately all hit by the onset of the pandemic. Due to the pandemic, we really had to rethink the way we conduct our operations. We definitely encountered a few hiccups, as I'm sure you all did, over the last year, but we were able to successfully meet all of our requirements. And we really accomplished a lot over the last year. In addition to our normal activities, several members of our staff provided support to the State Emergency Operations Center and the Joint Information Center during the pandemic. So as Dr. Salmon mentioned, we transitioned all of our SRO training to a virtual platform. We really are grateful to the Maryland Police Training Commission, who approved both a fully virtual training version of our training, as well as a hybrid version of our training. So that's really exciting. And this year we've been able to train, albeit virtually, 106 SROs and school security employees to date, and we actually have 150 students who are in virtual training right now. We've been hosting our Understanding the Role of the SRO training, which launched and premiered this past summer. Not only have we trained hundreds of school administrators across the state, but we've also had the opportunity and welcomed virtually again participants from 18 different states. We had some substantial and made some substantial changes to our website, really to improve functionality, streamline our content, and we've been working very closely with the Department of Information Technology and the Department of Disabilities to ensure that our site is fully accessible. One of the exciting things that happened this fall is our student focus group, which meets monthly. This fall launched the Focus Group Fridays on our Instagram account. So shameless plug here, Instagram is @SafeSchoolsMD. And our student focus group put together some student authored school safety themed content that we were able to share on our Instagram page. So that was really great. As Dr. Salmon mentioned, the Safe Schools Maryland Anonymous tip line or anonymous reporting system launched in October of 2018. You know, the pandemic definitely had an impact on the tips coming into the system, but we are still receiving tips. I want to highlight that we have all the public schools in Maryland are a part of the tip line. We have over 150 private schools in the system, and participation by the schools in the tip line is actually free for them. Pretty regularly, every month, we continue to add and train new schools. We took, on a national level related to tip lines, MCSS actually took over co-hosting a monthly national conference call for the growing number of states who are offering statewide school safety tip lines. This has actually been really exciting for us. We've been able to share best practices and discuss national trends among the entire group of states. So that's been really fantastic. We continue and did throughout the year administer grants on behalf of the subcabinet. In that process, we identified some challenges and we made improvements, not just in our grant administration, but in our own internal agency processes over the last year.
Tessin, it sounds like you all are doing some great work over there. Is there anything else that you wanted to summarize on your end? Because we'd love to hear your responses to the Department of Legislative Services recommendations and questions.
Sure. So most of everything that we have has been on our is included within our annual report. So please feel free to go to the website. I was not able to upload it to the MyMGA website because the file size was too large. But there is a lot of good content in there about all the good work that we're doing. So I did submit a written response to the analysis. I am happy to answer any questions about either our responses or our activities.
Would you be able to just go through it just very quickly?
Sure.
I don't know, since we're in this virtual world, we're trying to do the best we can. I'm not sure if every member of either subcommittee has your written responses in front of them. So if you could just quickly hit the highlights very quickly of your responses, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the first part of the analysis focused on the Safe Schools Fund fiscal year 2020 closeout. So this was grants for the SRO grant. So as Nicholas had mentioned, there was $10 million appropriated in general funds, which funded $10 million into the special funds. So this was really unique for us this year. The SRO grant was new in fiscal year 2020. We did not have that grant in 2019. We had a school safety evaluation grant, a hate crimes grant, and then the general school Safe Schools Fund grant. So, you know, this uniqueness, we misunderstood the allocation. We ended up providing or making available grants, both $10 million for local school systems for Safe School initiatives, Safe Schools Fund initiatives, and then $10 million for SROs. We figured that out about halfway through the fiscal year. We immediately made some changes. We had some pending grant applications that were getting ready to go in front of the subcabinet. So we requested that DBM and we requested support from the IAC to be able to fund those applications that were coming in. Then the pandemic hit. So in combination with the impact of the pandemic, the subcabinet not being able to host or hold their meetings even virtually, we were not able to approve any additional applications. So any pending applications that were not awarded went back to, at the end of the year, those funds were reverted. So definitely an issue that we identified. We made corrections. We've got some changes in our own internal procedures to ensure that that doesn't happen again.
Chairman Barnes, I think there's some questions.
Delegate Forbes? I don't see any hands on my end. What am I missing?
Delegate Novotny has a question.
Delegate Novotny, sorry. See, I knew you'd have questions today, Delegate.
There you go. Thank you so much. And I appreciate the presentation. So my question just revolves on the anonymous tip line, I guess. What kind of tips do you usually get? Is it just school safety, as in I see a unsafe situation, or what kind of tips in general do you get?
So it really runs the gamut. So the tip line's been around for about 2 years. We receive tips about bullying. We receive tips about the well-being of individual students. So concerns about someone else's either mental health or sort of how they're dealing with school. We receive tips about threats. So whether those are virtual threats, so online virtual threats, or actually physical threats. We receive tips on sort of general school safety. You know, the door wasn't locked today. The sidewalk has a problem with it. I think the important thing to note about the tip line is when we train schools, school systems, students, parents about the tip line, the number one priority is we want our students to speak to an adult first. But if they don't, there is this anonymous mechanism for them to use. But we do, within the analysis, you'll actually see the top tips over the last couple of years. And then in our managing for results, we also include all of the tips that we received for the prior year, broken down by.
That makes a lot of sense. Do people also have the ability to make a tip, say if they were unjustly, had an interaction with an SRO, if they felt any of those things? Are those tips coming through also?
So we could accept them. We have not received any of those, but that is, we accept any kind of tip. There's no, there's no limitation, or there's no parameters that say you can't submit this or you can't submit that. So those could come in, but we have not received any.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. Dr. Salmon, there were 2 other people from your shop that were signed up. I'm assuming they're just there to provide technical testimony, Brandenburg and Hans.
Yes, just in case we got into any very specific questions that I didn't feel comfortable asking, but that's all we had today.
No problem. Okay, I don't see any other questions on my side. Chairman Barnes, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. No other questions. We'll move along to St. Mary's College. We're hearing their budget today. Our analyst is Ian Klein. Ian, please take us through the analysis.
Great. I'm going to be sharing my screen right now. All right. So at this time, everybody should be seeing the St. Mary's analysis. Is that accurate? Okay,
Yes,
great.
ma'am.
And just
Yep.
one technical note right at the beginning on some of the analyses that you may have. It may say University System of Maryland underneath St. Mary's College. They are not part of the University System of Maryland, and that has been corrected in this analysis and will be updated on the website shortly, just as an FYI. For this analysis, though, we are going to get started on page 4, which looks at undergraduate enrollment from fall 2015 to 2020. Total undergraduate enrollment increased by 1 student in fall 2019 when compared to 2020. As illustrated in the exhibit, there's been a steady decline in the number of continuing students, while the number of transfer students has remained fairly stable over this period. The number of first-time full-time students increased by 61 in fall 2020 when compared to 2019. Turning to Exhibit 2 on page 5, Exhibit 2 shows St. Mary's out-of-state enrollment, which had generally been declining from 2013 through 2019. Declining out-of-state enrollment represents a significant financial impact to the college, as out-of-state tuition is roughly double the price of in-state tuition. So gaining 1 out-of-state student is financially equivalent to gaining 2 in-state students. In fall 2020, St. Mary's out-of-state enrollment increased by 20 students. Exhibit 3 on page 6 provides the ethnicity of the undergraduate student population at the college, illustrating that St. Mary's continues to be a predominantly white institution. Moving to student performance, Exhibit 4 on page 7 provides the college's 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year retention rates. While each of these retention rates remain high relative to the other Maryland public four-year institutions, there's been a steady decline for each category. The ELS asked the president to comment on retention, focusing on fourth-year retention by addressing what actions are in place to retain the continuing student population. Moving to Exhibit 5 on page 8. This exhibit shows the St. Mary's six-year graduation rate relative to its peer institutions. As shown in the exhibit, with the exception of 2016, St. Mary's six-year graduation rate was greater than the average of its peer institutions from 2010 through 2019. Exhibit 6 on page 9 provides the six-year rate by race at the college. Since 2015, the minority and especially African-American student population six-year graduation rate has fallen below the all-student average. The ELS asked the president to comment on the gap between the African-American student six-year graduation rate and the rate for the entire student population. Exhibit 7 on page 10 provides the 8-year graduation rate by Pell and non-Pell status. Both first-time, full-time, and full-time transfer non-Pell students graduate within 8 years at higher rates than Pell students at the college. Finally, Exhibit 8 on page 11 provides the fall 2017 to 2019 three-year average of undergraduate degrees per 100 FTEs versus the college's peer institutions. As illustrated, St. Mary's is toward the top of its peer institutions in degrees produced per 100 FTEs. Moving to affordability and access, Exhibit 9 on page 12 shows the estimated cost of attendance versus the average net price for full-time in-state students by income level between fiscal 2017 and 2019. The exhibit shows that the average cost of attendance over these years was $29,822. However, the actual net price for students when it was awarded averaged $20,729. What this exhibit also shows is that the cost of attendance will vary on income level. For example, in fiscal 2019, it cost a student $9,445 with an income of under $30,000, but just over $25,000 for a student with a family income of over $110,000. Exhibit 10 on page 13 shows the amount of institutional aid awarded and number of awards provided by category. The amount of institutional aid awarded has increased from $5.6 million in fiscal 2015 to $8.2 million in the fiscal 21 working budget. As is also illustrated in the exhibit, the amount of institutional aid spent on merit scholarship has increased relative to the amount of need-based aid awarded. The college indicated that 50% of merit aid awarded meets the student's demonstrated financial need. The ELS asked the president to comment on the increase in spending and number of awards for merit scholarship relative to the need-based aid, and if that best meets the needs of the student applicant pool. Exhibit 11 on page 14 documents the number of students receiving Pell Grants and utilizing other forms of loans. As shown in the exhibit, 332 students who were eligible for max Pell Grant funding received just over $1.5 million of that funding. The largest dollar amount of loans were Parent Plus loans, totaling just under $4 million for all expected family contribution levels. Moving to the impact that the financial impact that the COVID-19 pandemic had on the college. This is on Exhibit 12 on page 15. To ensure the safety of its students and personnel in March, St. Mary's pivoted to an online learning model. Refunds were provided to students who had made payments for room and board, and with no students on campus, there was a corresponding loss of auxiliary revenue. The fiscal 2020 shortfall, which totaled $4.4 million, and the funding sources utilized to address this shortfall were provided in this exhibit. The college ended with a surplus of $3.6 million as a result of federal, state, and PPP loan funding that were used to mitigate those revenue losses. For the fall 2020 semester, the college opted to open with a hybrid model, meaning every course was offered simultaneously face-to-face and remotely. Occupancy restrictions were placed on each type of housing unit on campus to ensure social distancing rules were in place. As shown in Exhibit 13 on page 17, to date, the college has a fiscal 2021 shortfall of $7.3 million. This shortfall stems from the July Board of Public Works reduction of $2.1 million, a loss of auxiliary revenue totaling $1.9 million, freezing tuition and fees at the fiscal 2020 level, a loss of tuition and fees, and other revenue shortfalls which encompass the remainder of that total. After accounting for reductions based on actions taken by the institution, CARES Act and CAA funding, and deficiencies provided by the state totaling $5.5 million, St. Mary's is still facing a $1.7 million shortfall for fiscal 2021. The ELS asked the president to comment on additional actions that will be taken to address the fiscal 2021 budget deficit. I'm going to skip over Exhibit 14 as the actions summarized in that exhibit were previously discussed in these COVID impact exhibits. The proposed budget The proposed 2022 budget found in Exhibit 15 on page 20 includes 3 deficiencies for the college: $0.4 million in general funds for COVID-19 related expenditures, $0.5 million in reimbursable funding for public safety personnel as a result of the pandemic, and $1 million in special funds for capital maintenance projects. Total funds will increase by $0.1 million or 0.1% relative to the fiscal 2021 adjusted budget. This funding amount does not include CAA funding found at the bottom of the chart. Institutions have until September 2022 to expend these funds, so this funding may roll over into fiscal 2023. Auxiliary revenue is expected to increase 8.2% or $1.3 million relative to fiscal 2021. DLS asked the president to comment on the expected increase in auxiliary revenue, indicating why such a large increase is expected. Exhibit 16 on page 21 provides the unrestricted revenues by fund source from fiscal 2019 through the 2022 allowance. The ratios for these levels remain roughly level over this period, with CARES Act funding supplementing lost auxiliary in fiscal 2020. Moving to the issues, which begin on page 23 and run through page 25. The one issue discussed involves the college's shift to remote learning as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. On these pages, the college provided a host of answers concerning transitioning to remote delivery of academic instruction in the spring, ensuring the quality of courses provided, providing student services remotely, as well as overall challenges and lessons learned that were applied for the fall semester. I won't go through all of these here, as they are summarized in bullet form on these pages. DLS requests the president to further discuss efforts to provide mental health services remotely, as well as to comment on how the shift to providing courses and services online provided new opportunities to the college, and what impact that will have on the college's future business model. The DLS operating budget recommended action is found on page 26, and that is to concur with the governor's allowance. And that concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer questions.
Well, thank you so much for your thorough analysis, as always. Are there any questions for the analyst? Let's see any. Chair Zucker? Okay, well, thank you so much, Ian. We will now hear from the agency. St. Mary's College, I know we have my favorite president with us, Dr. Jordan, and her team. Dr. Jordan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Chair Zucker, Chair Barnes, and members of the Senate and House subcommittees. It is a pleasure to meet with you today regarding St. Mary's College and our FY22 operating budget. With me today are Dr. Larry Leak, our trustee, Paul Pusaker, our VP for Business, and Chip Jackson, our Government Relations Liaison. As always, thank you for your support of St. Mary's College. I also want to thank Ian and the staff for an excellent analysis of the college. There are many complex issues, and you've done well to understand us. We have provided you an extensive review of the college in our written testimony. I will limit my remarks to key issues and will occasionally reference exhibits within the document. Also, we've provided detailed responses to the analysts' questions in our written testimony. I will highlight key issues during our presentation. Before I begin, let me say that we are grateful that the governor's allowance funds St. Mary's College consistent with our funding formula. We also appreciate the staff's recommendation to concur with the governor's allowance. Importantly, I want to let you know that your efforts to reset our formula in 2017 is making a difference. Thank you. The Maryland legislature designated St. Mary's College as the state's public honors college in 1992. We are, in fact, the nation's first public honors college. We have a unique mission within the nation that promotes scholarship and creativity by challenging our students to achieve academic excellence through close relationships with faculty within a community dedicated to diversity and accessibility. As you know, enrollment at the college has been a concern for the past several years. I'm pleased to tell you that this year, total enrollment is up over 2%, as shown in Exhibit 1. Our recruitment efforts are now paying off. You can see in Exhibit 2 that enrollment of first-time new students increased 19% over the year before, and is the highest in the past 5 years, despite the pandemic. The increase in new students is a result of our varied efforts to enhance our position within the higher education landscape. These include implementation of our new LEAD curriculum that integrates the proven long-term benefits of a traditional liberal arts education with the applied skills demanded in today's economy, the launch of our new brand as a National Public Honors College, and our enhanced marketing efforts. Together, these initiatives have made St. Mary's College both more relevant and competitive. Illustrating this success, applications for the fall 2020 semester increased 53%. That's shown in Exhibit 3. Our success in attracting new students bucked the trends, both here in Maryland and nationally, as many institutions saw declines due to the pandemic, as illustrated in Exhibit 4. I'm also pleased to report that the sharp increase in applications last year was not a fluke. As shown in Exhibit 5, we're currently ahead of last year's applications by 8%. I believe that our sustained record of student success and our efforts to modernize our curriculum and market our new brand are resonating well with prospective high school students and their families. I now want to turn your attention to issues related to access and affordability. For many years, tuition and fees at St. Mary's College were among the highest in the country for public institutions. With your help in 2014 and 2015, we were able to lower our tuition substantially. Thank you for that. Since then, we have continued our efforts to moderate tuition increases. I'm happy to report that tuition today is still less than it was 8 years ago in 2014. But going forward, the challenge of balancing the need to remain competitively affordable while providing an excellent liberal arts education and paying the bills associated with that remains. In context of this challenge, the college has remained committed to providing a robust financial aid program to our students. For the fall 2020 entering class, 92% of students received institutional financial aid. And over the past 5 years, St. Mary's College has increased institutional aid by 38%, as shown in Exhibit 7. Now, while we're discussing aid, I'd like to address the analyst's questions regarding need-based aid. First, let me say that the appearance that merit aid has gone up at the expense of need-based aid is misleading due to the fact that much merit aid also supports need. In order to be responsive to the market, where many students and their families prefer to receive merit awards rather than need-based awards to recognize their accomplishments, the college has intentionally packaged aid accordingly. By no means, however, does this represent a reduction in the college's commitment to need-based aid. In fact, as shown in Exhibit 7, the total amount of aid awarded by the college that address student need in accordance with the reporting standards of the Common Data Set has increased from $4.6 million in 2016 to $5.7 million today. To illustrate this point, I refer you to Exhibit 8, which shows that for those students receiving aid, the percent of need met by institutional aid, which is need-based and merit, has increased from 67.5% to 77% over the past 5 years. As a result of our commitment to meeting our students' financial need, the amount of aid for students receiving need-based aid has increased on average from over $6,500 to more than $8,200, which represents a 26% increase. Indicators of our success in providing aid and supporting our students are shown in Exhibits 9 and 10. Comparatively speaking, our students graduate with relatively little debt. This is a result of both a strong aid program as well as the fact that many of our students graduate within 4 years. Also, our student default rate of 3.4% is far below the national average and suggests that our graduates get jobs and are able to repay their loans. I'd now like to discuss our academic programming, where our continued focus on innovation ensures its relevance in the market and supports our ongoing record of outstanding student outcomes. Major publications continue to highlight St. Mary's College as one of the top liberal arts colleges in the nation. Contributing to our success is an academic program that provides students with many opportunities to participate in high-impact practices at rates that far exceed national averages. High-impact experiences, including internships and faculty-student collaborative research, are central to our new Learning Through Experiential and Applied Discovery, or LEAD curriculum. This new curriculum provides all students with an integrated academic program that combines deep knowledge of their major with real-world experiences to better prepare them for life after graduation. The LEAD curriculum results in a reimagined applied liberal arts program designed to provide students with a distinctive experience that enhances career preparation and begins in the core curriculum. We're also in the process of developing and/or implementing new majors in neuroscience, marine science, applied data science, and business administration. These programs were chosen based on a thorough review of their demand, both among prospective new students as well as the job market. Now I'd like to briefly address the analyst's last question, asking if our recent experiences during the pandemic provide any lessons that could impact our future business model. While our written testimony describes a variety of services and processes that we're assessing for the future, two are noteworthy. First, the remote health and counseling services we implemented due to pandemic have improved access to services for our students. And second, online courses introduced during the winter and summer breaks have been very successful. Not only did participation in these winter and summer courses exceed our expectations, we have evidence showing that these courses have allowed students who were falling behind in terms of graduation in 4 years to get back on track. While St. Mary's will remain a predominantly place-based liberal arts institution that leverages its close student-faculty relationships to produce an outstanding educational program, we believe that our programming can be effectively supplemented with targeted online courses, and we will continue to develop that. Now, not only do we provide an outstanding educational program, we provide equal opportunity for a diverse citizenry. St. Mary's College has made a significant impact in reducing the achievement gap. Exhibits 11 and 12 illustrate how well students from underrepresented populations are retained and graduate relative to the general student body and to our peers. For example, and as Ian stated, the 6-year graduation rate for both our Pell eligible students and students of color exceed the average 6-year graduation rates for all students at Maryland's public and private 4-year institutions. In response to the analyst's first two questions found on pages 6 and 8 of the analysis regarding 4-year retention and the 6-year graduation rates of our African American students, I can assure you that retention and timely graduation of African American students is extremely important. While our written testimony details many initiatives, I can inform you that I have established new team structures, reporting processes, and support services aimed specifically to enhance the retention and graduation rates of our students of color and those from traditionally disadvantaged backgrounds. Many of these initiatives are, of course, applicable to the general student body as well. Of the many initiatives outlined in our testimony, I want to point out that our faculty are highly engaged in our retention and graduation rates, which enhances their success. These efforts are showing promise as the estimated 6-year graduation rates for African American students is predicted to increase from 50% this past spring to 69% in 2021 and to 70% in 2022. We're also continuing to increase our recruitment of students from diverse backgrounds as shown in Exhibit 13. So Chairs Zucker and Barnes, that concludes our testimony. Again, we're grateful for the governor's FY22 allowance and for the analyst's recommendations. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jordan. We certainly appreciate always getting thorough responses to the analysis and to the questions posed. So we appreciate that. Chair Zucker did have to get off for a medical appointment this afternoon, so he wanted me to let you know that he's sorry and that he'll be back as soon as he can. Are there any questions for Dr. Jordan? Vice Chair Solomon, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, sorry, I had put it in the participant list, but I know sometimes it shows up and sometimes it doesn't. Thank you. Dr. Jordan, it's good to see you. I would echo our chair's comments. One of my closest friends is a St. Mary's graduate, so I have a lot of good memories of coming down and visiting him. And I would agree with your assessment. I think St. Mary's is one of the best values in the certainly in the region for out-of-state students. And so congratulations on the enrollment increase for this year in particular. That's an incredible achievement considering what we've been going through. I had one comment that I wanted to make, and then a question. First off, I applaud your team in getting the PPP loan. You're the only institution in the state that did that, and that's fantastic. So I know you're still in the process of trying to see whether or not that'll be forgiven. Hopefully it will. And I guess my comment on that would be that'll hopefully be able to, it seems like, fix or cover a lot of the deficit that you might have from some of the other COVID costs with hopefully a little bit left over, and would just urge you all to maybe think about, so many of your staff I know gave back to make sure that we could do cuts, and many of us on the committee had talked to a lot of other universities around the state about maybe doing hazard pay for some of those essential workers that were on the front lines the whole year. So maybe if there is some money left over in the PPP loan, thinking about trying to figure out a way to give back to some of those employees would be wonderful. And then my question for you was, I know you guys have the master's program in teaching, and I've heard from a lot of teachers in my district and around the state that they're worried there may be a shortage, with just a lot of teachers retiring early. And so just curious, I'm going to ask this to a lot of the universities in the state that come before us. Any thoughts of sort of creative programs or ways to, potentially increase that pipeline of teachers that we have in the future to fill the gap coming up post-COVID?
Our MAT staff and faculty are constantly in communication with St. Mary's County Public Schools and other regional ones, trying to give them whatever it is that they say they need with respect to students, and really promoting that within our student body. So we're doing a lot of stuff that's really directed towards the pre-service teacher. And so a lot of our work has to be directed towards the high schools and getting the students really interested in education. Unlike some programs, we try to offer the best programs according to the industry standard. So instead of offering a direct BA in education, we actually want our students to major in a subject area and then add the education to it. So we can grow our program, but we want to be pretty careful about that. And one of our things that we're trying to make sure is every student that graduates from our school or our program has options as to where they go, because they're highly prepared and highly successful there. And with respect to your comment about, hopefully having some money left over, I don't know if there's ever such a thing as having money left over. There's always a need somewhere, but I guarantee you that we always try to do well by our faculty and staff and give equitable pay when we can, and we will definitely do our best to take care of them in that respect. And we are doing special things for our staff and faculty who are on front lines with respect to keeping them safe and enhancing their surveillance testing and making sure they're the first ones we put up to get vaccines if possible. So we're trying to take care of them, and we will continue to do that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Jordan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks for the question, Mr. Vice Chair. Any other questions? Delegate Geist, do you have a question? No? All right. Dr. Jordan, I think that you have been very thorough. That's all the questions I think we have for everyone here. I don't see any senators or delegates with any other questions. So we appreciate you and your team and the great work you do down there in Southern Maryland. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Delegate Barnes, and everyone on the committees. We really appreciate our time with you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. And with that, I think that concludes our agenda for today. So we are adjourned. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.